The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss, and every alien in the orientation hall stopped moving. Some stopped breathing. A few stopped thinking altogether. Two figures stepped out into the light. The first was a young woman with black hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Her name was Park, and she was 22 years old. She had sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything at once, and she walked with the easy confidence of someone who had never learned to be afraid. Behind her came a young man named. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with calm eyes and hands that looked like they could build anything or break anything, depending on what was needed. They were humans, the first humans to ever attend the Galactic Integration Academy on Station Velar 7. The hall was filled with students from dozens of different species. There were creatures that looked like floating jellyfish made of soft blue light. They drifted through the air on invisible currents, their long tentacles trailing behind them like ribbons. There were insect-like beings with hard shells and many legs, their compound eyes reflecting the light in 1,000 tiny mirrors. And there were gentle plant-based creatures with bodies made of woven vines and flowers that bloomed in different colors based on their emotions. All of them were staring at the two humans, and all of them were afraid. The instructor, a tall crystalline being named, stepped forward. His body was made of something like living glass, and light passed through him in beautiful patterns. But right now, those patterns were sharp and nervous. He held it in his long fingers and consulted it with visible unease. "You are the human students," said. It was not a question. "That's us," said with a friendly smile. "I'm and this is, thanks for having us." Did not return the smile. He looked at his again, as if hopping the information there had somehow changed. It had not. The file on humans was short but terrifying. Their home planet, Earth, was classified as a Category 7 death world. This was the highest danger rating possible. Earth had crushing gravity that would flatten most species. It had an atmosphere filled with a corrosive gas called oxygen that would burn the lungs of any. It had extreme temperatures, violent weather, and more apex predators than any other known planet in the galaxy. And humans had not just survived there. They had thrived. They had built cities and roads and machines. They had tamed the predators and conquered the weather. They had spread across their entire world and then looked up at the stars and decided they wanted those too. The other students knew all of this. They had read the files. They had heard the stories. And now, standing just a few meters away, were two actual humans in the flesh. A young named was the first to speak. Their flowers had turned a pale, frightened white. "Is it true," asked in a small voice, "that your planet has creatures that hunt and eat other creatures for food?" Blinked. "You mean predators?" "Yeah, we have those, lots of them actually." "And you lived near them?" "Near them?" Laughed. It was a warm sound, but several aliens flinched at the sudden noise. "We had a cat growing up, little orange guy. He used to sleep on my bed." "A cat," said slowly. "That is a small predator, correct, with claws and sharp teeth." "That's right. And you allowed it to sleep next to you, while you were unconscious and vulnerable." "He was very soft," said, as if this explained everything. The students drifted backward. They clicked their mandibles nervously, even seemed to have trouble processing this information. Looked around at the frightened faces and felt a little bad. He had known that aliens might be nervous around them, but he had not expected this level of fear. These beings looked at them like they were monsters. "Hey," he said gently, raising his hands to show they were empty. "We're not here to hurt anyone. We're just students, same as you. We want to learn and make friends." "Friends," a student repeated. The word came out as a series of clicks and hisses. "You wish to form social bonds with us?" "If you'll let us," said. "We know we're different, but different doesn't have to mean scary." A long silence followed. Then slowly lowered his. The patterns of light inside his crystalline body shifted from sharp and nervous to something softer. "Very well," he said. You are students of this academy, and you will be treated as such. I will assign you quarters and provide you with your class schedules. You will be expected to follow all rules and participate in all activities." "Sounds good to us," said. "However," continued, his voice careful, "I must warn you, our curriculum was designed for species with different physical requirements. You may find some aspects challenging." And exchanged a look. They had been warned about this too. The academy was built for beings who lived in low gravity, breathed different gases, and had never needed to outrun anything trying to eat them. The humans would have to adapt. But adapting was what humans did best. "We're looking forward to it," said. Nodded slowly. Then he gestured toward a corridor leading deeper into the station. "Follow me, your new lives begin now." As the two humans walked past the crowd of alien students, the whispers began. The hum to each other in frequencies most species could not hear. The clicked in rapid communication. The flowers shifted through colors like a silent conversation. They were all asking the same question. What had they just let onto their station? And none of them, not even, had any idea what was coming next. 3 weeks passed, and the alien students began to relax. The humans were strange, yes. They ate dead plants and animals, which was disgusting. They slept for 8 hours every night, which seemed like a waste of time. And they made a horrible barking sound called laughter that scared everyone the first few times they heard it. But they were also kind. Helped a struggling student understand mathematics by drawing pictures in the air with her fingers. Fixed a student's broken translation device using nothing but a small tool and his bare hands. They smiled often, spoke gently, and never once tried to hunt anyone. Maybe, the aliens thought, humans were not so dangerous after all. Then came the day of the gravity exercise. The class gathered in the simulation chamber, a large white room where the environment could be changed to match any planet. Today, they would practice moving through an obstacle course. It was a simple test, designed to build coordination and teamwork. Stood at the control panel, his crystalline fingers dancing over the buttons. The gravity in the room was set to 0.4 G, which was standard for most species in the galaxy. At this level, movement was easy. Bodies felt light. Even the heaviest could jump several meters into the air. "Begin," announced. The students moved forward. They floated through the obstacles like ghosts, their tentacles barely touching the ground. They skittered across walls and ceilings, their many legs finding grip on every surface. They moved slowly but steadily, their vine-like bodies bending around corners with natural grace. And moved differently. They walked instead of floated. They jumped instead of drifted. Their movements were heavier, more deliberate, like they were fighting against something invisible. "The humans seem to be struggling," a student named Sorrel observed. "Perhaps their bodies are not suited for this." "Perhaps," agreed. He watched the two humans with curious eyes. They were completing the course, but they looked uncomfortable. Their steps were too strong, their jumps too powerful. They kept overshooting their targets. Then made a mistake. His fingers slipped on the control panel. Instead of pressing the button to end the exercise, he pressed the button for preset environments. And instead of selecting a gentle world, he accidentally selected Earth. The gravity in the room changed instantly. It went from 0.4 G to 1 G. The effect was immediate and horrible. Every alien in the room collapsed. They crashed to the floor like wet cloth, their delicate bodies suddenly weighing more than they had ever weighed before. They screamed in high frequencies as their membranes stretched and tore under the pressure. They fell from the walls and ceilings, their exoskeletons cracking as they hit the ground. The sound was like breaking glass. They could not even scream. They simply crumpled, their vine bodies pressing flat against the floor as if a giant invisible hand was pushing them down. Himself fell to his knees. The light inside his crystalline body flickered with pain. His fingers scrambled for the control panel, but it was too far away. He could not move. He could barely breathe. The screaming filled the room. Students cried out for help in a dozen different languages. Some prayed to gods had never heard of, others simply sobbed. And then through the chaos, saw something impossible. The humans were standing. Not just standing, they were moving. Was running across the room, his heavy footsteps shaking the floor. He reached a fallen student and lifted them with one arm, as if they weighed nothing at all. He carried them toward the emergency zone near the door, where gravity dampeners would protect them. Was doing the same. She moved faster than had ever seen anyone move. She jumped over obstacles, grabbed fallen students and dragged them to safety. Her face was focused, determined, showing no sign of pain or struggle. Hal gasped, "How are you doing this?" Paused just long enough to look at him. Her eyes were calm. "This is normal for us," she said. "This is home." Then she was gone, running back into the chaos to save more students. Had reached the control panel. His fingers flew over the buttons, and suddenly the gravity returned to 0.4 g. The invisible weight lifted. Students gasped and sobbed with relief. Some vomited. Others simply lay still, too shocked to move. The medical team arrived within minutes. They treated cracked shells and torn membranes and bruised bodies. They scanned everyone for internal damage. And through it all, they kept looking at the two humans with wide, frightened eyes. And were not even breathing hard. "That was 1 g," Sorrel said later, after the medical team had cleared everyone. This voice was shaking. "Earth gravity. We experienced Earth gravity for less than 2 minutes and it nearly killed us." "Yes," said quietly. He had not stopped staring at the humans since the incident. And they live in it, every moment of every day. How do they survive? I do not know. Turned to look at and who were sitting together in the corner, quietly checking each other for injuries they clearly did not have. But I am beginning to understand why their species conquered a death world. The other students looked at the humans with new eyes. Not just fear anymore. Something else. Something like respect. And deep down, in a place none of them wanted to admit, something like awe. Caught them staring and smiled. It was a gentle smile meant to be comforting. But somehow, it only made him more terrifying. "Sorry about the scare," he said. "We should have warned you. Earth gravity is pretty intense." Pretty intense. The words echoed in the silent room. The aliens had nearly died, and the humans called it pretty intense. The young whose flowers had turned pure white with fear finally found their voice. "What else," they whispered, "do humans consider normal?" Neither nor answered. But their silence said everything. After the gravity incident, the alien students treated and differently. They still kept their distance, but now it was not just fear. There was curiosity too, questions asked in quiet voices, glances that lingered a little longer. "What are you? How do you exist? What made you this way?" The humans answered when they could. They explained about Earth's heavy gravity, about the billions of years of evolution that had shaped their bodies into survival machines. They talked about their bones, dense and strong, designed to carry weight that would crush other species. They talked about their muscles, powerful enough to run for hours without stopping. They talked about their hearts, pumping thick red blood filled with iron to carry oxygen to every cell. The aliens listened, with a mixture of horror and fascination. But they had not yet seen the worst of it. That came during the chemical laboratory class. The lab was located on the lower level of the station, in a section designed for dangerous experiments. Students studied various gases and liquids from across the galaxy, learning their properties and uses. Safety was always the top priority. Every container was sealed. Every procedure was checked 3 times. Nothing could go wrong. Until something went wrong. It was a simple accident. A student named Chitter bumped into a storage shelf while reaching for a tool. The shelf wobbled. A containment unit fell, and when it hit the floor, it cracked open. Green gas poured into the room. The emergency system identified it immediately, a mixture of hydrogen sulfide and chlorine. Both were deadly to most galactic species. Even small amounts could destroy lung tissue and poison blood. The gas spread fast, filling the lab like water filling a sinking ship. Students screamed and ran for the door, but the emergency lockdown had already activated. The doors were sealed to prevent the gas from spreading to the rest of the station. They were trapped. His voice came through the speakers, sharp with panic. Everyone moved to the far corner. The filtration system is activating, but it will take several minutes to clear the air. Cover your breathing organs and stay calm. But staying calm was impossible. Students were already choking. This delicate membranes were burning. They were coughing so hard their shells rattled. These flowers were wilting and falling off. He looked back at her. They did not need to speak. They already knew what they had to do. Grabbed a piece of cloth from her jacket and soaked it in water from a nearby sink. She tied it around her nose and mouth, covering her face. Did the same with a piece of his own clothing. Then they ran into the gas. "What are you doing?" screamed through the intercom. "That gas is lethal. You will die." "Maybe," said, her voice muffled by the wet cloth, "but not for a few minutes." She disappeared into the green cloud. The aliens watched in disbelief. They could not understand what they were seeing. No species ran toward poison. No species chose to breathe death. It was madness. It was suicide. It was human. Inside the cloud could barely see. Her eyes burned like they were on fire. Every breath felt like swallowing broken glass. The gas was eating at her lungs, trying to kill her with every second that passed. But human lungs were not like alien lungs. Human lungs were built by a planet that had spent billions of years trying to kill everything on it. They were tough. They were stubborn. They could hold oxygen in the blood for minutes at a time, keeping the body alive even when the air turned to poison. Was not breathing the gas, she was holding her breath. And she was moving. She found a student collapsed on the floor, their tentacles limp and still. She grabbed them and dragged them toward the emergency exit. A second trip brought back two. A third trip saved a who had stopped moving entirely. Worked beside her. He was bigger and stronger, able to carry two students at once. His eyes were streaming with tears from the gas, but he never stopped. He never slowed down. Back and forth, one student at a time. The clock was ticking. Could feel her body starting to fail. Her chest was screaming for air. Her muscles were burning from lack of oxygen. Dark spots danced at the edges of her vision. But there was still one more student. A small, barely more than a child, curled up in the corner of the room. Ran. She grabbed the young and stumbled back toward the exit. Her legs felt like they were made of stone. Her lungs felt like they were filled with acid. The dark spots were getting bigger. She made it through the door just as her body gave out and collapsed against the wall, coughing and gasping. Their improvised masks were soaked through and useless. Their eyes were red and swollen. Blood dripped from his nose, and his hands were shaking so hard she could not control them. But they were alive. And so was everyone else. The medical team arrived and went to work immediately. They treated the students for gas exposure. They cleaned eyes and repaired membranes and flushed poison from bloodstreams. And then, when everyone else was stable, they turned their attention to the humans. Sorrel, the medical officer, scanned with trembling tentacles. "I do not understand," Sorrel said. "Your lungs are damaged. Your blood is carrying traces of poison. By all logic, you should be dead." "We're tough," said. Her voice was rough and broken. "Humans are really tough." "This is not toughness," Sorrel said. "This is something else. Your cells are already repairing themselves. Your body is fighting the poison and winning." They looked at her with something that might have been fear or might have been wonder. "What are you?" Thought about the question for a long moment. "We're survivors," she said finally. "That's what Earth taught us to be. No matter what happens, no matter how bad it gets, we survive, we adapt, we keep going. She looked at, who was lying on a medical bed with his eyes closed, but his thumb raised in a weak sign of victory. And we never leave anyone behind. Sorrel stared at her for a long time. Then slowly, they bowed their head in a gesture of deep respect. Thank you, Sorrel said, for being impossible. Smiled despite the pain. You're welcome. The story of the chemical lab spread across the station like fire. Within hours, everyone knew what the humans had done. They had walked into poison gas. They had held their breath for minutes. They had saved 12 students and then collapsed laughing and coughing like it was some kind of joke. The humans were no longer just strange visitors from a death world. They were becoming legends. But the biggest legend was still waiting to happen. 1 month after the chemical incident, the class took a field trip to a nearby moon called Velar 4. It was a small, rocky world with thin air and strange blue plants. The purpose of the trip was to study geological formations and collect samples for the science department. Stay together, warned as the students left the shuttle. Do not wander off. This moon has native wildlife that can be dangerous. Everyone nodded and agreed, even and promised to be careful. After all, they were guests in this galaxy. They did not want to cause any more trouble. For the first hour, everything was peaceful. Students walked in small groups, scanning rocks and taking notes. The blue plants swayed in the thin wind. The sky above was filled with the beautiful rings of a gas giant that dominated the horizon. Then Chitter wandered off. The young had been distracted by an unusual rock formation and had walked too far from the group without realizing it. By the time Chitter looked up, the other students were small figures in the distance. And something else was much, much closer. It came out of the rocks like a nightmare. 6 legs, each one ending in a curved claw, a body covered in black scales that seemed to absorb light, a head that was mostly mouth, filled with teeth that looked like broken glass, 2 red eyes that burned with hunger. A mauler, the apex predator of a dozen moons, a creature so dangerous that entire survey teams had been killed by a single one. And it was looking directly at Chitter. Chitter froze. This was not a choice. This was instinct. Most species in the galaxy had evolved to freeze when facing a predator, stay still, do not attract attention, hope the predator loses interest and goes away. It was a survival strategy that had worked for millions of years. But the mauler did not lose interest. It roared, a sound that shook the ground and echoed off the distant mountains. Then it charged. Chitter could not move, could not think, could not do anything but stand there and wait to die. And then something impossible happened. A figure ran past Chitter, heading straight toward the monster. He was sprinting at full speed, his feet pounding against the rocky ground. In his hands was a geological sample rod, basically just a metal pole used for testing soil. It was not a weapon. It was barely even a tool, but held it like a spear. And he was screaming. The sound that came from his throat was not like anything the aliens had ever heard. It was loud and raw and filled with something primal, something ancient, something that came from a time when humans had fought predators with sticks and stones and nothing else. The mauler actually stopped. For just a moment the massive creature hesitated. Its red eyes blinked in confusion. This was wrong. Prey did not run toward predators. Prey did not scream challenges. Prey did not attack. But this prey was doing all of those things. Reached the mauler and swung the metal rod with all his strength. It cracked across the creature's skull with a sound like thunder. The mauler stumbled, more surprised than hurt. Then it got angry. It swiped at with one massive claw. He ducked, rolling under the attack with the kind of speed that should have been impossible for something that lived in crushing gravity. He came up swinging, hitting the mauler's front leg. The creature roared in pain and anger. Behind them had reached Chitter. "Move," she shouted, grabbing the frozen and pulling them away from the fight. "Everyone move, get to the shuttle now." Her voice cut through the freeze response like a blade. Suddenly, the alien students could think again. They could move again. They ran, their legs and tentacles and vines carrying them towards safety as fast as they could go. Kept fighting. He could not win against the Mauler, he knew that. The creature was bigger, stronger, and had natural weapons that could tear him apart in seconds, but he did not need to win. He just needed to buy time. So he kept swinging, kept dodging, kept screaming that primal challenge that seemed to confuse the predator more than hurt it. The Mauler had never encountered anything like this. On its home moons, prey froze, prey ran, prey died. That was the natural order of things. But this small, soft creature was doing none of those things. It was fighting back. It was hurting it. It was not afraid. For the first time in its life, the Mauler felt something new. Uncertainty. Saw the change in the creature's eyes, the confusion, the doubt. He took a step forward, still holding the bent and dented metal rod, and screamed again. The Mauler flinched, and then it turned and ran. The apex predator of a dozen moons, the killer of entire survey teams, ran away from a single human with a stick. Stood there for a moment, breathing hard. His arms were shaking from the effort. His throat was raw from screaming. He had cuts on his arms from near misses, and his whole body ached from the adrenaline that was still flooding his system. But he was alive, and so was everyone else. He walked back to the shuttle slowly, each step heavier than the last. When he reached the door, every alien was staring at him with wide, unblinking eyes. Was the first to speak. "You charged a Mauler," the instructor said. His voice was very quiet, very careful. "Those creatures have killed entire survey teams, trained soldiers with advanced weapons, and you attacked it with a metal pole." Shrugged, his shoulders ached with the movement. "It was going to hurt Chitter. So you decided to hurt it first." Yeah, leaned against the shuttle wall, suddenly very tired. Seemed fair. Chitter pushed through the crowd of students. The young, compound eyes were wet with something that might have been tears. "You saved me," Chitter said. "You could have died and you saved me anyway. Why?" Looked at the young alien for a long moment. "Because that's what we do," he said. "Humans protect each other, and you're one of us now." Chitter stared at him. Then slowly they reached out with one clawed hand and touched his arm. It was a gesture of trust, a gesture of family. "Thank you," Chitter whispered. "Thank you for being a monster on our side." Laughed, wincing at the pain in his ribs. "Anytime, friend, anytime." The story of the Mauler spread faster than any story before it. Within days, it was all anyone on Station Velar 7 could talk about. The human who had charged an apex predator. The human who had screamed at death and made it run away. The human who had saved a classmate using nothing but a metal stick and pure, terrifying courage. But the story did not stop at the station. It spread to other stations, to planets, to entire star systems. Ships carried the tale across the galaxy, and everywhere it went, beings stopped what they were doing to listen. Humans, the species from the death world, the creatures who lived in crushing gravity and breathed corrosive gas, the beings who did not freeze when facing predators but attacked them instead. The galaxy had heard stories about humans before. Everyone knew they were dangerous. Everyone knew they were strange. But the stories had always made them sound like monsters. This story was different. This story made them sound like heroes. At the end of the semester, gathered his class for a final address. The graduation ceremony was held in the main hall of the academy, the same place where and had first stepped off their shuttle all those months ago. The room was packed. Every student was there, along with faculty members and visitors from across the sector who had come specifically to see the legendary humans. Cameras floated through the air, broadcasting the ceremony to millions of viewers on distant worlds. Stood at the podium, his crystalline body glowing with soft light. He looked out at the crowd for a long moment before speaking. "When humans first joined our academy," he began, his voice carrying through the silent hall, "I believed they would struggle. Their planet was classified as a death world. Their bodies seemed crude compared to our own. I thought their primitive origins had left them unprepared for the challenges of galactic civilization." He paused, and the light inside him shifted to something warmer. "I was wrong." The crowd listened in perfect silence. "Over the past months, I have watched these two humans do things I did not think were possible. I have seen them stand in gravity that would crush us all. I have seen them walk through poison gas that would kill us in seconds. I have seen them charge predators that would make our bravest warriors run in terror." Turned to look at Anne, who were sitting in the front row looking deeply uncomfortable with all the attention. "But these acts of physical strength are not what makes humans special," he continued. "What makes them special is why they did these things." He let the words hang in the air. "They did not show their strength to frighten us. They did not use their power to dominate or control. Every time they pushed themselves beyond what should have been possible, it was to protect others, to save lives, to help beings who were not even their own species." His voice grew stronger. "Humans are not adapted despite their world. They are adapted because of it. Every challenge that Earth threw at them made them stronger. Every predator that hunted them made them braver. Every disaster that threatened them made them more determined to survive." He spread his crystalline arms wide. "And now, after billions of years of fighting to survive, they have finally reached the stars. They have found a galaxy full of beings who are weaker than them, slower than them, more fragile than them. They could have chosen to conquer. They could have chosen to exploit. They could have chosen to become the predators they once fought against." Lowered his arms and smiled, light dancing through his body. "But they chose to protect instead." The hall erupted in applause, hummed in frequencies of joy, clicked in approval, bloomed with flowers of every color. The sound was deafening, overwhelming, beautiful. And looked at each other, both of them blushing with embarrassment. They had never wanted to be heroes. They had just done what felt right. After the ceremony, the students gathered outside for one final goodbye. The semester was over and many of them would return to their home worlds. But something had changed, something that could never be undone. The young who had once been terrified of humans floated forward. Their flowers were blooming in shades of warm pink and gentle gold, colors that meant love and gratitude in their species. Slowly, carefully, extended a vine-like appendage and wrapped it around his hand. "When you first arrived," said softly, "I was afraid of you. I thought you were monsters, dangerous creatures from a world of nightmares." Smiled gently but did not speak. "I was right," continued. "You are dangerous. You are stronger than us, faster than us, tougher than us. You can do things that would kill any other species in the galaxy." The flowers bloomed even brighter. "But you use that power to save us, to protect us, to run toward danger so that we can run away from it." Squeezed hand. "Thank you," they said. "Thank you for being terrifying in all the right ways." Felt something warm bloom in her chest. She looked at, who was surrounded by students all clicking their thanks and admiration. She looked at Sorrel, the who had once scanned her with trembling tentacles and now floated beside her like an old friend. She looked at all the beings who had once feared her and now stood beside her as equals. "You know," said, "when we first came here I was worried. I thought maybe we were too different, maybe we would never fit in. Maybe we would always be the scary humans from the death world." She looked around at the crowd of aliens, all watching her with warmth in their eyes. "But I was wrong. We're not different. We're all just people trying to survive, trying to learn, trying to make friends." She grinned, and this time no one flinched. "We just happen to be really, really hard to kill." Laughter filled the air. It was a strange sound made up of a dozen different species all laughing in their own ways, but it was also beautiful. It was the sound of understanding, of acceptance, of friendship. Walked over and stood beside. He put his arm around her shoulders and looked out at their new friends. "So," he said, "same time next year." The crowd cheered. And somewhere in the distance, a mauler was still running, never quite sure what it had encountered, only knowing that it never wanted to meet one of those screaming creatures again. The humans had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same.